Can Nebraska run the ball against the worst rushing defense in the Big Ten? Will the Huskers make a field goal on Saturday? Stay with us. We have answers.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
All right, here we go. It is Friday. Nebraska leaves Lincoln today to play their first road game of 2024 at Purdue, the first road game of the Dylan Raiola era as well. First road game for him. Kickoff at 11 o'clock Central on Peacock. So get your streaming services, get your internet, ready to roll. We got football to watch on Saturday morning. We've barely talked about this game all week, Mitch. It's kind of funny. So we're gonna just shove it all into one episode today. We'll make our picks. We'll talk about the game. We'll preview it, and because of that, we're gonna skip the mailbag questions. So keep piling them up. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We'll get to them. We're not trying to dodge your questions. We'll get to them. Yeah. So this is a whole show devoted to picks and props as we dive in. Yeah. All right. Let's do it as we start. So we'll start to get an idea of. Go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, I just wanted to review. Into the history here. I wanted to review a little bit of where we're at last week. Last week was kind of an even week for us, as we both missed on Nebraska, Illinois. We both had the Huskers to cover. We both picked Dylan Raiola to go over his 225.5. Various picks. We had Dante Dowdell correct. In summary, after 4 weeks, I'm at 15. You're at 11 on the props for Nebraska. I'm 2-2 for Nebraska against the spread. You're 1-3 Nebraska against the spread. Ooh. But you do have a significant edge over me, or at least a 2-game edge over me in the overall against the spread. You are 15, 15, and 1. I am 13, 17, and 1. So we're hanging about even on the bonus bets. We'll have another bonus bet today. Last week we talked about Arch Manning. You have a 1-0 lead over me. So
I'm excited for today's bonus question, by the way. So we'll get to that. Yeah, those numbers wouldn't play horribly on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Let's just say that. Okay. Mm-hmm. Nebraska props over under. Let's start with Dylan Raiola, as we usually do. His passing yards number set this week by the Mitch Sherman Sportsbook is 199.5. Mitch, where are we going?
So basically the question here is Dylan going to throw for 200 yards again? Will he do it again? 297 last week. Purdue, one of the better pass defenses statistically in the Big Ten. That is for the most part because Purdue is so bad at defending the run. I am going to say that Dylan goes over, that Dylan gets to 200 yards again in this early portion of his Nebraska career.
I do too. I think it's actually closer to probably 250 here, and I think that's kind of the expectation for him. Given whatever game throws at you. So yeah, I'm a clear over on this one. So
remember though, the weather could be a factor, and we'll talk about that later in this segment.
Thank you, Helene. So Nebraska rushing yards, Purdue allowing 269 rush yards per game. Notre Dame smoked them on the ground, and so did Oregon State. We're going to set this number high for Nebraska rushing yards. Remember, they're averaging just 140 on the ground so far this year. 189.5 is the Nebraska rushing yards total number.
Sadly for Nebraska, I'm picking the under. I think Nebraska is going to focus on the pass game as it does, even with some elements in play, some wind, some rain. Dylan's got an arm to throw through that wind. I think they're going to go with what works. Probably run for 160, but I don't see 190 coming up in the rushing column.
I agree with you completely. I think you take a closer look at what Purdue has sort of done this year. Obviously, it's been bad. they've really struggled against mobile quarterbacks. Nebraska doesn't have a mobile quarterback, and they're going to, have their kind of NFL style offense. I think 160 would be a great target to hit on just any given game for Nebraska. There's an adjustment there that I think we all have to make. So yeah, I think I'm pretty clear under on this one as well.
Dylan was at like minus 58 on his rushing yards last week. So not the mobile threat that Riley Leonard presented when the Irish came into Ross-Ade Stadium the last time a game was contested there.
So Devin Mockabee, the Purdue running back, is somehow only a junior, and we're going to call him a 10th year junior or something like that. He's been running it pretty well, as he's done throughout his entire career. He's had a lot of success against Nebraska in his first 2 shots against him. We're going to put his number at 87.5.
I think they found Devin Mockabee as like a general student in the Purdue population, and he is a walk-on. I do believe he came to West Lafayette to play football, but it would be a better story if he was living in the dorms, maybe was a good high school player, and they pulled him out, and all of a sudden, then they had their running back for the next 7 years. So I'm going over. I think Mockabee is going to be very close to a triple-digit game against Nebraska on Saturday if he doesn't get there. I'm over 87.5.
Give me the under here. I like Nebraska's rush defense to bounce back. And a lot of this is going to be, I think, about game script, as it has been for Purdue the entire year. They get down early, and they're not really, they haven't allowed themselves the opportunity to commit to the run very much. I think that's basically what we're looking at here. So I'll take the under for Devin Mockabee.
Okay.
As we move on to the next one. So here's a fun one. Nebraska's net punting average. They're averaging 35 yards net punts so far this year. That is good for 113th in the nation. Mitch, there's only like 130 teams, so that's bad. Just to be clear, we're going to put this number at 37.5. Weather, remember, and a whole bunch of other stuff going on. What do you think about that one?
And Purdue has a good return game. Not a huge amount of returns, but a good average for Purdue in the punt return game. Look, this isn't all on Brian Buschini, but some of it is certainly on him. He's got a kick to his coverage. This is part of complementary football, just like the defense coming up big when the offense puts them in a spot to succeed. The punter has to work with his coverage, and while Buschini has displayed a big leg this season, they haven't always been they haven't meshed direction. Well. Right. Well, in one particular case, it wasn't the right direction, and that was a costly one that brought the average down. I'm going to say over. I'm going to give Nebraska. I think this is something that got attention in practice this week, and I'm going to say Nebraska goes over 37.5.
That's kind of the way I was headed too. Well, let's get Buschini a bounce back as well. They cover it well, and he punts it in the right direction. Hopefully every time. Over 37.5.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on to some player picks for Nebraska in this Saturday game at Purdue. As we do every week, Nebraska's leading receiver, this is in terms of yardage. I need to write that in the little document here. We are picking yards, not catches. So who will lead the Nebraska receivers in yardage?
I have been pretty steadfast in keeping Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair at the top of this. I just haven't been very good at picking one or the other on any given
the wrong
week.
One.
So let's do this. Ja'Cory Barney. Barney is going to have a big game. Purdue has not set the edge very well, and I think they could get him going for a bunch of different stuff in this game, whether it's kind of short stuff behind the line of scrimmage or take shots down the field where he tends to take some big hits. I'm going to go with Ja'Cory Barney on this one.
If I was dishonest about how I conducted this exercise, I would just pick Barney too, because I really like that pick. But I write these down ahead of time, and I said Jamal Banks, so I'm going to stick with Jamal Banks. He had kind of a breakout game last week against Illinois. It was clearly his best game, his most consistent game at Nebraska. I keep thinking about that back shoulder throw that he caught from Dylan Raiola. I think Banks is the only receiver on the team who can make that kind of a connection with his quarterback. He's very seasoned, and it's going to show in the Big Ten for a second week in a row. I like Banks. Nebraska's leading rusher. We'll keep it simple here. Leading rusher in terms of yardage, who is he?
I had to think about this one. It's usually Dante Dowdell, and I'm still going to go with Dante Dowdell, but I think there was a late there's a late Emmett Johnson run that's gonna pop here at some point. So give me Dowdell, but just so it's on the record, I think Emmett Johnson has a nice game on Saturday too.
Yeah, it is on the record because that's who I picked. Nice. Emmett Johnson, he's my guy. I think they regret the way it went a week ago with Emmett and not giving him the opportunities that he probably deserved. So I think he's going to get some early chances in this game and he'll make the most of them. And I don't even think it's going to be like a late game thing. I think that he ends up being the back with the hot hand in this game. I think he matches well against what Purdue is going to throw at Nebraska with its rush defense. And he ends up being the guy who has the most carries and the most yards.
All right.
Will Nebraska commit a personal foul? There were 4 of them in the game last week, all on the defense. Could have been a 5th for a face mask that wasn't called on the Illinois quarterback, Luke Altmaier. What do you say? Can they get it down to 0 from 4?
I'm going to play the odds here and say they cannot get it to 0. They will commit at least 1 personal foul.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think 1 is probably a good number. But we don't have to have a number. We just have it. Will they?
We pick what the foul will be?
We can try that. We can do that. Yeah. Give me something.
Roughing the passer.
Roughing the passer, RTP. We'll make a note of that. I'm going to say face mask. I think those things have been happening too much, and Nebraska won't be able to break that habit. Okay, last one here before we pick before we take a break and then come back and pick the score of the Nebraska game. Will the Huskers kick a field goal at West Lafayette? John Hole going out for his second game as the Nebraska kicker this week with Tristan Alvano still on the sideline.
Yeah, so last week that would have been a 38-yard field goal? 39-yard field goal. So let's say John Hole makes a 39-yard field goal in this game. Yes, redemption for John Hole. He makes one.
He did kick a field goal last week, but it was not the one with the game on the line. They all count for 3 points. Nebraska's chasing 3 points here, and they got the 3 points from John Hole in his first attempt with the Huskers. It was a chip shot, basically an extra point, but it was good nonetheless, and then it was not good at the end of regulation from 39. I'm with you. I think he will kick a field goal, and you will see that reflected in the score that I pick from this game when we come back from the break after this. All right, Mitch Sherman here to tell you about Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For specific product disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC.
And I'd like to tell you.
Whoops, we're going to take that away. Go ahead and tell us about Homefield, Connor.
I'd like to tell you about Homefield. Let's put them up right there. Homefield, the place to get your gear. Maybe you're a little late getting your gear into the college football season, or maybe you need to gear up for when the colder weather starts to come around. Homefield is the place for you, and we got something for you. The Can't Miss Kickoff campaign, all about gearing up for the football season. Homefield, we told you about them before. Let's tell you about them again. A premium collegiate apparel brand. They're based in Indianapolis. We're talking about college football sickos who make stuff for college football sickos. Retro design. It's awesome. It's fantastic stuff. And the best part is you'll see everybody else around you at the games or at the tailgate wearing stuff from Homefield. So you don't want to miss out on that opportunity. Affiliated with more than 180 colleges, the Can't Miss Kickoff campaign is the thing to do right now. Football boxes, coaches jackets, bomber jackets, and the football box. That's something that you want, Nebraska fans. It contains 3 never before seen Nebraska items not available anywhere else and it's gear for the entire year, whatever kind of weather. Platinum VIP boxes, add a new hat or a ringer, a VIP koozie, and a 2024 Platinum Pass that guarantees 20% off and early access. So you get in before the boxes sell out, and they will, trust me. We've tried Home Field. It's fantastic. It's great. You're going to want to get in this action because everybody else is doing it. Check out the website, homefieldapparel.com. That's homefieldapparel.com.
Okay, back here on this Friday of our picks show, the Locked On Nebraska pod. You have found us. I'm Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. When we last spoke before that break, we were just about to get to our score predictions for the Nebraska-Purdue game. Connor, you're up first. What do you see happening in West Lafayette?
I've been cooking up this score all week, and I've been bouncing around with a couple different numbers, but here's what I'm settling on. I like to pick weird numbers, but I'm going to go with pretty square numbers this week. Nebraska 30, Purdue 20. Ooh. So that is not a cover at 10.5, but if you could see it at 9.5, then it is. It just depends on where we're taking it here.
Last couple weeks, I've been strangely accurate on predicting Nebraska's score. I had Nebraska winning 24-13 last week, so got the Nebraska score right. The week before, I had Nebraska scoring 35 points, and it scored 34. So I'm impressed with myself in that way, although 1-1 against the spread in those 2 weeks is nothing to write home about. This week, I've got 31-17. Nebraska wins 31-17, 4 touchdowns, and that field goal from John Hull gets it done. Defense plays has a bounce back performance somewhat, and the Huskers head home feeling much better about things at 4-1. Okay, we are going to move on to some Big Ten action Friday night tonight on Fox. I know you're excited about this.
I love
Washington at Rutgers, and the Scarlet Knights, still unbeaten, are a 2-point favorite at home against Jed Fish and the defending national runner-up Washington Huskies. I like saying that.
I got to tell you, I've liked Rutgers since the summer, and they haven't really done anything to move me off of that. I think they're still sort of limited offensively, but man, they get it done with their defense and their sort of run game, their physicality with Kyle Monungai. Give me Rutgers to cover the 2 at home, and they beat the defending national runners-up.
Okay. I have Washington. I was impressed with Washington and what it did. I know it was Northwestern that Washington opened with last week, and this is not like classic Northwestern, but whenever you think it's not classic Northwestern, that's when it becomes classic Northwestern.
Great point.
And if there is a team that would just be like a total trap to play in your first Big Ten game ever, it would be Northwestern. You would think, oh, look, it's just Northwestern. They're Purple Cats. And you would then lose the game. And it was in Seattle, and Washington won it handily, like 24-5. Basically did to Northwestern what Nebraska's done like once in the last decade. So I'm up on Washington this week, and I think the Huskies go into Piscataway and get a victory as an underdog. Second game we're picking here in the Big Ten, Maryland at Indiana. Hoosiers are a 6.5-point favorite. This one, they should be ranked, by the way. This one is Saturday, 11 a.m., Big Ten Network. Indiana's average margin of victory this season in 4 games, 41.5 points.
The 6.5 is a scary number for me, but I do think this is a close game. So I'm going to take my gut here and go with the Dogs on the road to cover Maryland. I could certainly see them winning the game too. So let's go with Maryland. I think they've grown into a tougher, more physical team. And we'll see how Indiana is able to handle it. I'm not a huge buyer on Indiana quite yet.
Kurt Cignetti all the way. 6.5 points. That's he's laughing at 6.5 points. Indiana wins. Hoosiers are 5-0. Going into October. I like Indiana. Okay, next one we go out west, Wisconsin at number 13, USC. Trojans are coming off that physical game up in the big house at Michigan, come back home. They got another team that likes to hit you, not vintage Wisconsin this year. Badgers had a bye last week. They are 14.5-point dogs going into the Coliseum Saturday, 2:30 p.m. CBS.
I kind of liked what you were hinting at there, and that was what I was going to get to today, get to on this one too. So I think USC will learn a lesson this week, and that is when you play a physical, beat you up, hit you team, you're going to feel it for a week. I don't think Wisconsin wins this game, but I think they lose by 2 touchdowns or less. Give me Wisconsin to cover on the road.
It was a very mean act by the Big Ten to put Michigan and Wisconsin on the schedule the first 2 weeks that USC is in the Big Ten. I like Wisconsin also, not to win the game, but to cover the 14.5. That's a lot. That's just a lot of points. I mean, maybe if they were playing Oregon or Ohio State this week, but USC is a very good team, but not 14.5 points better than Wisconsin. We will see. Last game on the Big Ten schedule for us this week, ranked on ranked, number 19 Illinois at number 9 Penn State, 6:30 on NBC, Big Ten at night. Nittany Lions are a 17.5-point favorite at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I think people, Nebraska fans looked at that line this week and said, "Oh boy, are we that far off? What's going on here?" I'm not a huge buyer on Illinois, although Altmaier is a whole heck of a lot better than I think people give him credit for, or maybe thought he was at the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. This is just a tough number, though. I think Penn State wins like comfortably, but I think Illinois is probably like, it just seems obvious, and so I'll take the low hanging fruit and go with Illinois to cover. But I don't love doing it.
I'm with you because like I look at it, it's like, what am I not seeing here? This is kind of an obvious one. 17. So you're telling me that Penn State can win 31-14 and I still get the cover with Illinois? I'll take that. I'm going with the Illini to give me 17.5 points, and I feel good about that. All right, when we come back after the break, some national games and then that surprise bonus pick that we talked about. There is a big game in the SEC this week, but it's not as big as it would have been last year or any year in college football history before. We will discuss that next.
Well, Mitch, we're picking all these games, and there's no better place to get that action than the FanDuel Sportsbook. It's for college football, it's for Major League Baseball, and it's for the NFL. So you could start the season with a big return on the FanDuel Sportsbook, which is, of course, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, and you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, so much more on the same page, all where you place your bets as well. That we're talking about live betting. It's all there for you on the FanDuel Sportsbook. So let's get you kicked off the right way. Get you started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, as Charles Barkley would say, when you place your first $5 bet. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Go there right now. Head to FanDuel.com. Once again, that's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer back with you on the final segment here on a Friday. Once again, Nebraska, Purdue at 11 o'clock. Mitch will have you covered from West Lafayette, and I will have you covered from my couch this week, which I am extremely excited about.
Yeah, look for a reaction show from us before I head back to the Good Life State.
Excellent. So yeah, we'll plan on that on Saturday at some point. Okay, so big games this week in college football. Let's start in the Big 12 with Oklahoma State, who's coming off a tough loss to you. I mean, they really didn't look good against Utah. Kansas State, speaking of not looking good, they were it was a close game for a minute, and then all of a sudden it was not at the end of the first half at BYU, thanks to a big punt return and some other stuff. K-State's a 4.5-point favorite at home in Manhattan. This is 11 a.m. following College Game Day on ESPN.
The Big 12 says goodbye to Oklahoma and Texas this year, and hello to the entire state of Utah, which now owns the league after knocking off these two teams who are both still ranked, the Cowboys and the Wildcats. I like Kansas State. I think Kansas State has a better chance to bounce back from this one, being at home. than does Oklahoma State. I've seen Oklahoma State play a couple times this year, and I think you get them out of Stillwater. Kansas State is going to kind of fundamental them to death, and that was not a Chris Kleiman coached performance that we saw at BYU late on Saturday. I like K-State.
Yeah, teams are just kind of loading up on Oklahoma State and with Ollie Gordon and making them pass it a little bit as well. I'm going to go with K-State here. A little more dynamic, and I think they're the better team overall. So give me K-State to cover the 4.5. Colorado coming off the Hail Mary against Baylor. I mean, to force overtime and then win it in overtime. Colorado's on the road at UCF. UCF is a 14. I saw this at 17.5. It's now at 14.5 as we record this. This is 2:30 on Fox, and I'll note this for the local folks. So Jason Benetti was originally supposed to be calling this game. It will now be called on Fox by Kevin Kugler. So that will be the voice that you hear on Fox. UCF a 14.5 point favorite.
We should say, I hope they can get to Orlando for that game. As we record this thing, Hurricane Helene, which we referenced could be a little factor for Nebraska with like some rain showers in the area of northern Indiana, on northern central Indiana on Saturday afternoon. It is taking apart the state of Florida. So our thoughts are with everybody in Florida and Georgia as that beast moves north. Orlando, of course, is inland, and I would think they're going to be able to play a game there. Nobody's playing in Tampa this weekend. I certainly hope. UCF, 14.5 point favorite, coming off of a huge comeback last time out against TCU, taken to this Big 12 thing. I like Colorado, though. Colorado's going to lose the game and cover the points, maybe lose by 14. Probably some crazy stuff is going to happen in this game. Yeah. But the Knights, I like to win. I'm sorry, Knights to win, Buffs to cover.
You nailed it. I think there's going to be some wild stuff that happens in this game because it's a Colorado game. I don't really, that's a couple numbers where I just don't quite get it. I like Colorado to cover that as well on the road with their stars, of course, too. I don't know who's going to win what games in the Big 12, much less by 2 touchdowns. So that's our pick for this week. Number 21, Oklahoma is coming off a bludgeoning that Tennessee gave them in their first SEC game last week at home. They benched their quarterback. They're going to a new one. Oklahoma's a 2.5 point favorite when they go to Auburn this week. This will be 2:30 on ABC.
Auburn's 2-2. I think Auburn feels like it's lost to 2 teams that it might be better than in Cal and Arkansas. Oklahoma's a favorite going in there. Auburn feels like its season is on the line. Sooners ranked 21st after that difficult night against Tennessee last week. I like Oklahoma to win and to cover the 2.5.
Give me Auburn here. I don't love either team, the vibes of either team right now. But I'm just going to take the home team and getting some points there. Oklahoma is going to, I think, find it difficult on their first turn through the SEC as they did last week. So I'll take Auburn to cover the 2.5 here on their home field. And the big game of the week in college football is Georgia going on the road to Alabama. Alabama has the win against Wisconsin. Georgia has they killed Clemson in week 1. We'll see how those 2 games sort of, kind of play out throughout the rest of the season as far as how those teams look. But this is the game of the week, 6:30 ABC. Georgia is a 1.5 point favorite on the road in Tuscaloosa.
So kind of a pick 'em, 1.5 points. You're just going to pick the team you think's going to win. So I had Bama written down, and then I changed it because I started thinking about the coaching matchup and how Kalen DeBoer is this is the first run through for him in not only this series but just getting into the SEC. And I think Kirby Smart, he's the new Nick Saban. Okay, so I like Georgia to go into Alabama, win that game, cover the 1.5.
It's a really good bounce back spot for Georgia after what happened to them against Kentucky last week. Right. And they were able to get out of there with their lives. But I've been kind of thinking Alabama on this one all week, and I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to make a late change like Mitch did. I'm going to stick with Bama here.
All right.
And this game will be important in the narratives, I think, for the rest of the season as far as the coaches are concerned, and in college football in general.
And not necessarily important for the college football playoff, because both of these teams are likely to be in it. So when I said this game was more important in a previous season, hey, the regular season, here's one game in the regular season where this might just be a tune-up. These teams feel each other out. Maybe they play in the SEC championship. Maybe they play in the college football playoff. I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world. All right, we are going to finish these last few minutes with a special bonus pick. So last week it was Arch Manning. You were correct, Connor, in picking the under for Arch Manning's passing number. I had him at over 365.5, which, looking back at it, was aggressive. Arch went for 258. He thoroughly outdueled General Booty of UL Monroe. This week, in recognition of the horrific overtime period that Nebraska played against Illinois, we're going to have a little bit of fun with this pick. So as I introduce this question, I want to throw a shout out to our friends, Matt Schick of ESPN and Nick Baugh of Fox Sports. So you don't know that I was going to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Why, you ask, I will explain. But first, those guys and their Schick and Nick empire are the gold standard here when it comes to Nebraska, speaking about Nebraska football in the podcast space. They're the best. It's appointment listening every week for me the past 4 years. I can't start my week if I've not heard their show. I hope you hear this, Schick and Nick.
They will
not let me down with any of your delayed shows. Like, we've got to have it Monday morning. So this week on their show, in only the way that they can do it, Schick and Nick had some fun talking about the overtime period against Illinois. And Nick wondered aloud if it was possibly the worst overtime ever played at any level of sport. So I do not believe this to be true.
I mean, it was 3rd and 42 after all.
Yeah.
I mean,
I once watched an overtime game in basketball. It was actually a triple overtime game that Nebraska lost by 17 points. So the third overtime period in that game went just as bad, maybe worse than the one on Friday night. In theory, Connor, you could have an overtime game in college that lasted just one play if it ended on a defensive score. I dug into this, and that's never happened. It has happened in 2 plays. And in the NFL, the Broncos beat the Steelers on 1 play in overtime in the 2011 playoffs. Do you know who threw the 80-yard pass in that game to end the Steelers' playoff run in one play?
That'd be Mr. Tebow.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to this question. In what game will Nebraska next go to overtime? We are going to pick this. And then the second part of the question, will it end the 8-game streak of failing to get a first down in that overtime period? We're going to save the receipts on this. Whenever Nebraska gets to overtime, we're coming back to this and we're going to assess our answers. What do you say?
No more this year. No more overtime games this year. So let's go ahead to next year. And I'm looking at the schedule, and we don't have dates for conference games yet, but let's go into the conference. And I will say that when Nebraska plays their football game at Penn State next year, they will go to overtime and they will get a first down. The streak will be over. No guarantees on points, but they will get a first down.
Okay. All right. I do believe Nebraska will play another overtime game this year. They've been coming at us about once a season, so the odds might say that Nebraska's not going to, but it came so early. First Big Ten game of the year. Here we go. Overtime is back. It was the last Big Ten road game of the season last year that Nebraska played an overtime game. So Matt Rhule is good at this, at getting Nebraska to overtime. Look, when Wisconsin comes to Lincoln in November, I think with where the Badgers are going to be, you're going to think, okay, Nebraska can get this one. But it's not going to be as easy as people expect. Wisconsin's not going to roll over. They're going to be very prideful. They're going to know about their history with Nebraska, and they're going to take Nebraska to overtime. And not only is Nebraska going to get a first down in overtime in that game, it is going to win that overtime game. So that is my bold prediction. I went above and beyond on projecting a first down, and I also projected a win.
Hey, we got a lot of receipts to keep on this podcast, so just bookmark this one because we could look like absolute idiots, and whether it's a year from now or like a day from now,
Monday.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. It's been fun as it is every week, and we'll have a whole new game to talk about on the reaction pod whenever that comes out at some point over the weekend. Appreciate you making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast. Make it your second listen, and the link to that podcast is in the description below. Check that out. We'll have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.